I think that instead of just riding the trend, you first decide what you want to say. See whether the trend that you want to ride is actually relevant for your brand or not. I think what's happening is that everybody is so keen to be seen that they're not very they're not very focused on what they're seen with, and that I think will change. I think in this year itself. I'm paying you money to showcase my ad, and then you are still not showcasing my ad and blaming it on the algorithm which you have created. I think that writers are also actors with words. I want to see some resource where there is a lot of work by bots, so that you know that okay, this is the level that they've already reached.
Hmm.
And I don't know whether bots have a sense of humor or not. So that may be the next challenge that we have faced. That how do you make sure that Amul doesn't go from utterly butterly delicious to utterly bottily delicious?
What's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say Amul ads? Me being a 90s kid, for me, it's the Amul topicals. The one-liners with the caricatures that we used to see on hoardings at every street corners or the newspapers almost every alternate day. They used to touch upon every single topic, be it the World Cups, the Cricket World Cup, the Football World Cup, or event and politics, or any new movie release, or be it the Olympics. On today's podcast, we have a very special guest. It's the man, the brain behind these witty one-liners and copies. It's Manish Jhaveri. Manish has been working with Amul for over the last 2 decades and been writing these topicals for Amul consistently. So in this conversation, we touch upon how does Manish come up with these really memorable one-liners or the topicals? How does Amul always come up with creatives that remain etched in people's memories? How should businesses look at not just riding trends when it comes to marketing, but creating content that's effective in building the brand image as well as the brand value of the business? We also touch upon what the future of advertising, marketing, and branding should look like. How should marketing teams look at uniquely tapping into the emotions of the audience and conveying what their business is all about? How should platforms look at changing the way their algorithms or the propositions work in order to cater to what the future of advertising, branding, and marketing might look like? And last but not the least, how should or what should aspiring copywriters or aspiring content creators look for or prepare for if they were to plan for a career where they have to collaborate with businesses and brands? I found this conversation unique, rare, and I got some really unique perspectives around how should creators, businesses, as well as platforms prepare for the future of advertising. So hang on, listen to this conversation with Manish Jhaveri on the KVKurious Podcast. Hi, Manish. Thanks a lot for doing this podcast. And
Welcome.
really appreciate this on a Saturday evening amidst your busy schedule.
No. I mean, it's always nice when your work is recognized and lauded by people. So I'm happy to be part of this podcast. And please go ahead and ask me whatever you want. And
sure, that's some free permission. Really appreciate that. So tell me, Manish, why do we remember Amul ads the way we do? We don't remember most other ads. What's it about Amul ads that it really strikes a chord in our brain? Be it the jingles, be it the visuals, be it the copy, and you are the copy man.
So I've been associated with the Amul hoardings since, say, 26, 27 years. And before that, before I was associated with Amul, even I was a fan of the Amul hoardings. That time there weren't, that time social media wasn't really there. And the only place where we saw these Amul hoardings were on, these Amul topicals were on roadside hoardings. And even then they created a little flutter of excitement amongst everybody because they sort of laughed with you rather than at you. So, living in India is not very easy. There are, more problems than in most countries. We like to look at ourselves as a developed country. But, there are lots of things which sort of pull us back down to earth. And Amul made light of those situations. It was never mean or it didn't really, drag you down, but it pointed out to the same frustrations you had in a in a light manner, and I think people connected with that. I connected with that when I was a viewer, and now people are connecting with that now that I'm a creator, I think. So, we don't malign anybody, but at the same time, we point out to the little things that most Indians go through. And I think
Right.
that has a connection.
So when you bring about this fact that you're able to take a dig at maybe social issues or maybe socio-economic issues and things that people want to raise their voice against, and you're able to do it in a much lighter sense, right? You're able to convey the message, but at the same time retain your cleanliness, if I may use the word. But at the same time, we're noticing that comedy is highly risky in modern times. If you think about it, there's hardly very few comedians who haven't been to jail at least
I
for a
know.
few minutes, right? How do you think you're able to maintain that balance and stay away from any bashes against media or against people?
So I think what we always remember is that the fan following that Amul has is not what we are in it for. We are advertising the brand. We want to make our advertising memorable. Whatever else happens is, something which is welcome, of course. So we keep that in mind. We will never take a stand. People can say whatever they want, but we will never take a stand which will harm the sales of the brand in any way. You know,
Hmm.
we have to keep that in mind. We are not here to entertain people. If that happens, we are very happy. We are here
Right.
to sell the brand in an entertaining manner, and there is a difference. So,
Hmm.
if you look at all the kind of social media advertising that is happening today, um, if you look at it, the whole topicality is a buzzword today. But think of Amul; it has been doing topical advertising since you know it's older than I am. The first hoarding was
Right.
like done 56, 57 years ago.
And
So
almost on a daily basis, right? Any world news, there is always a banner
no,
for it.
no, not on a daily basis, but we do nowadays. We do around say around 14 to 15 topicals a month. We
That's still,
unlike
one every other day.
yeah. That's true. See, the thing is, what we decided very early on is that it doesn't make sense to talk about every topic.
Hmm.
You have to maintain a certain quality standard. If you look at some of the advertising that or some of the stuff that is done in the name of advertising or in the name of trends, they're not very creative.
Right.
But because they're trapped in that thing that they have to come out with something today, they have to come out with something every day. I think the level of humor has also probably dipped a bit. I don't want to be
Right.
too critical, but I think that uh, uh, numbers have become more important than content, and that I don't think should continue for too long.
So, other than numbers, how do you determine the reach of your content? Because you mentioned you do this, advertising from the standpoint of branding and not necessarily to entertain people. So, if not numbers, how do you, identify if you're reaching the right target audience or not? And if so, how effectively?
So I'm not on Twitter, but Rahul Dakuna, who owns Dakuna's, is on Twitter, and Amul also puts out the topicals on Twitter. So certain topicals are liked more than others on social media also. But even not on social media, lots of people see a topical, and they might know somebody who's associated with Amul. They will probably send a hi or a message to those guys saying that we really like the hoarding, or maybe this hoarding we didn't really like it as much as the previous one, whatever it may be. So that information gets through, and that is more in the last 5 years. Before that, we didn't have all these issues at all. We used to put it out. Many were liked, some weren't liked, and that's okay. We are not, we understand that everything we do may not sit well with everybody, and that's okay.
Interesting. And you mentioned you approach Amul from the standpoint of branding and not entertainment, and you mentioned one of your prime focuses is how do you make the
No,
advertisement
no, no.
memorable, right?
Let me correct you there. I'm saying that yes, what we look at the Amul hoarding campaign. For us, the Amul hoarding campaign is a branding campaign that should be entertaining, not
Got it.
entertainment first. So it is branding campaign, but it should be entertaining because that is our tone of voice. That is what we have inculcated over so many years. So that, lightness of spirit we shouldn't lose out on.
Lose out.
Though, though when we are doing tributes to people who sort of passed or something like that, we have a different way of looking at those things, because those are also topical, but you won't find any puns in that. You won't find any, witticisms in that. It'll be more of a salute to the celebrity or whoever it may be who's sort of,
The
uh,
topic of the day.
who's, yeah, who sort of, like, for Pele was one of the few things where we had a pun, because it was, I thought that the line really summed up what he was.
Right.
With a goat being born every 3 years in football, uh, our line said Simpele the best, which
Right.
I really thought was. And though I mean, when he'd come to India, I was like maybe 2 years old. But when you see old videos and when you see all the things that he did in matches and how he made football a global game, we just thought that this was a very fitting tribute to Pele.
Interesting. I got that point, but where I was coming from is you mentioned when you're approaching from a branding perspective, one of the key attributes is it should be memorable, right?
Yes.
How do you, take account of that? How do you make sure that it's memorable? What are some maybe tips, not to audience per se, but what are some pointers that you keep in mind to make sure that something is memorable?
So I think every writer brings his, own formula, to use a word, to the table. So initially, when I joined all those years ago, some of my lines were very anglicized or very English.
Mm-hmm.
But then the turning point was when we did a political hoarding, wherein Congress wasn't decided on who their candidate should be. It was a choice between Narsimha Rao, it was a choice between Sonia Gandhi and Arjun Singh, and we came up with the line, "Party Patni or Wo," with a question mark. So who will
Good
be the thing?
pun.
So that, yeah, so that was like a turning point, because that, everybody was, and this is, I'm talking about like many, many years ago when social media wasn't on at all. So
Right.
everybody started talking about it. Rahul got called saying, "Arey, yaar, damn good line, fantastic line," whoever had seen it. And then we said, okay, maybe linking it up to movies in a way can really, and it was not that Amul hadn't done it. Amul had done something like that earlier also. Amul Akbar Anthony, much before I joined,
Mm-hmm.
which is also a very simple line, but very nice. So they used movies in a very creative manner, but this formula I thought really worked, wherein use an English line, but change one or two words into Hindi or another language, or use a Hindi line and change one or two words into English.
Mm.
And becomes that gives a very good context to the thing, and people, because finally the people we are talking to are all multilingual or at least bilingual, so they can easily connect the dots, and it works for us also.
Right. And do you think it's just language that's playing the role, or is it maybe the reference itself? There's some element of recollection when there's a reference, and people are able to associate, this brand every time they look at that particular, let's say, Pile. Every time discussion on Pile comes up, the Amul discussion is going to come up, right? Because everyone is going to remember the line, and it's maybe because of the reference itself.
So I think more than the lines, while I'm proud of the lines, I feel that the main architect of Amul is Jayant. Jayant is the cartoonist. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the way he imbues the way he, if we are showing Amitabh Bachchan in a hoarding, it will be Amitabh Bachchan will look like our Muppet's grandfather, but
Right.
he'll be from the same family of cartoons. If we are showing anybody else, you immediately know that that person is from the Amul family, and those expressions that he manages to get onto the faces. It could be anything. It could be surprise. It could be happiness. They are very brilliant, and I think that is where I feel that uh, we have an edge over some of the other topical stuff, because these are hand drawn cartoons. So that's
Right.
why we cannot do things as quickly as some other people do.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're just taking a picture and putting it out there and then putting a line on it, it's much easier. But when you're drawing out the entire thing, like for example, if we were going to do a topical on you, he would, get your glasses, he would get your hairstyle, he would get all of those little things in, and then whatever the line is, whatever, I would probably give him some direction saying that the topical is going to be touching upon this element, and he would include a few of those things in. So I feel that freshness of Amul, one of the main reasons for that is Jayant's handiwork. It's really, really, and I mean, there are so many when we look back on some of the work we've done, we just keep saying that, wow, I mean, this particular drawing is just incredible. So, that adds many, many shades to our work.
So you think the visuals influence how the text is interpreted?
It's the other way around. We think of the topic first. So
Mhm.
Rahul and I will probably have a conversation, and we'll say, okay, now this is a good topic. Let's do something on that on this topic, and then we'll tell Jayan that, okay, we want to do we want to do something on like there's one big there are two big movies being released in Chennai on just before Pongal. Two superstars are going to be competing with one another. So he said, okay, that's a good topic for the South Indian market. So let's do something on that. Then we'll share some references with him that these are the kind of looks that they have, and then he does his wizardry. But
Got it.
the thought comes first, and then the picture.
Interesting. And you mentioned this point about back in 90s, maybe when the Narasimha Rao election was happening, there wasn't social media as such, and maybe it was hard to reach as many people, right? But at the same time, do you also think that when newspapers were the thing, and Amul had their hoarding on maybe the first or any other middle page, which occupies one of the 16 or 20 pages, it's occupying massive real estate and capturing most attention of anyone who is using the newspaper, right? And of course, after that, there is word of mouth being carried on.
No, I didn't get your. I didn't really get the question. Can you just sort of?
Do you think it was easier to reach more people through newspapers when that was the only medium of communicating, as opposed to social media, because attention span is much lower?
Okay. So, in the 90s, at least in the late 90s, we didn't put too many Amul hoardings into newspapers. They were only outdoors, but we had many sites across the country. Then newspapers, Amul started publishing the topicals in newspapers maybe in 2005 or 2010. I don't remember the exact date. But yes, when they went in the newspapers, not every topical of ours went into the newspapers, only certain select topics went. So, in those days, we also used to do certain topics only for certain city-specific topics. So there used to be some topics only for Mumbai. So they used to go only in the Mumbai newspapers. Those kind of things used to happen. And maybe it was easier reaching people then because everybody was reading newspapers. Now we don't know what everybody is consuming. It's like some people might be getting their news from InShort. Somebody must be getting it from somewhere else. So yeah, it's a little diffused. But I think that more people are seeing our topicals today than they were 10 years ago or even 20 years ago.
Interesting. And let's say when you're selecting a topic, every topic might have a certain target audience, right? Because not everyone watches football or not everyone, let's say, watches tennis. So when you're picking a certain topic, do you specifically cater to the audience that will understand that reference, or do you try to be as open as possible?
No, we don't really consider the audience as such. We just decide that this is, the way we choose the topics is that the topic should be there in the first 2 or 3 pages of a newspaper. So in that sense, we still go by what the newspapers are talking about. And if that's the case, then we are probably pretty confident that it would have also been covered by different language dailies, and people, irrespective of where they are situated, would at least know a little bit about the topic we are talking about.
Got it. The reason topicals are very interesting for me is I was an avid quizzer back in school in early days of college, and any quiz competition that I ever attended, there always used to be Amul hoarding where one of the words used to be missing, and one of the questions where we had to identify that. So I used to follow these puns very avidly, and I write puns myself. I run a very closed Instagram page where I write a lot of puns, and often it's dank or dark. Which may not be open to most people. So it's interesting how your take on puns is, right? Because you mentioned maybe that's one of the ways to bring in references and strike people's memory.
Yeah, we have very early on only. It's not that we've not done controversial stuff, but we feel that any controversy, and this day and age especially, controversies only tend to harm the brand, and I don't think that's fair though Amul has always given us a very long rope, I don't think it's fair on the brand to have advertising that brings down sales rather than increases it.
Right. Okay, maybe if we drift away from topicals, and what do you have to say about the TV advertisements about Amul?
So I am associated only with the Amul topicals. I don't do the other stuff for Dakunas at all. I'm basically a consultant with Dakunas. Have been for the last 20 years. I was a full timer with them in the first 4-5 years that I was with them. But since the last 20 years, I have moved on, and I only do the Amul hoardings for them. So these other TVCs and things like that are handled by Rahul Dakuna himself and by other agencies. Mudra is there, Ulka is there. So there are various brands that handle different aspects of Amul.
Got it. And do you think, writing or the text or the lyrics of the jingles might also be the game changer when it comes to Amul advertisements?
So I do write jingles for other people, and I think it's very, very important because you're getting an opportunity today, and especially today. When we started out, that time TV time was very expensive, basically.
Right.
Now you can make much longer jingles. You can say a lot more, and it is you can be you can paint a far more complete picture of the brand or of your message than you could in maybe 30 seconds. And that I think is definitely a game changer. Yes, lyrics are very important.
But when you mentioned about that, don't you think, we say less is more, right? And when you're speaking about being able to convey a lot more in a longer duration, while most people are today drifting to platforms like maybe Instagram, Chingari, YouTube Shorts, or most of these platforms, which are primarily 30 seconds. And the attention span might be as low as even 15 seconds, right? If someone doesn't like something in the first 10 to 15 seconds, they're just going to scroll through. So how do you manage to retain attention if you're going for longer pieces of content?
You just have to make sure that the content is really good.
And how would you define good?
You have to, firstly, you are your first target audience. If you aren't satisfied, then nobody else will be. So you have to, once you've finished writing a piece, it could be anything, writing, whether it's a press ad, whether it's a jingle, whether it's a topical, whether it's a post, whether it's anything, whether it's a story. If you read it to yourself, if you see it and you say, yeah, this is nice. This is something that I'm very happy that I've done. And then you are at least on the right path. Then it doesn't matter whether other people don't instantly like it. At least you are not disappointing yourself. And I think that can only come from not taking shortcuts. And I also feel that, there are too many trends these days. And I think that instead of just riding the trend, you first decide what you want to say. See whether the trend that you want to ride is actually relevant for your brand or not. Just because the algorithm is going to make your post seen by more people, what use is it if the post itself is crap?
Right.
You've gone with the trend, but it's not really a post that is doing good for your brand. Then why go with it? It just means that more people are seeing a stupid message.
But at the same time, it's also a constraint that platforms will stop promoting your content if you're not creating consistently, right?
Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. And I think that there is going to be some sort of, in the coming, I wouldn't say years, but I would say in probably in the next 12 to 18 months, a lot of brands are going to look seriously at the way their money is being spent on these platforms. It's like I'm paying you money to showcase my ad, and then you are still not showcasing my ad and blaming it on the algorithm which you have created.
Right.
I'm paying you the money, right? You're getting your money. It's not that you will get my money only if you follow a particular algorithm. That doesn't happen. You're getting my money irrespective of whether my ad is seen by 20 people or 2,000 people.
But the way digital... Sorry, continue.
No, please tell me.
No, but the way digital or performance marketing works is you input maybe the target audience, the age group, the demography, and stuff like that, right? And you also mentioned the number of eyeballs that this piece should hit, and the platform delivers that. You might tell 1,000 impressions, and the platform is going to give you 1,000 impressions. It doesn't matter who those 1,000 are or if they engaged actively, right? And that's why we see a very low conversion rate from impressions. And that's the reason most brands tend to go for, let's say, performance marketing, where you're not caring about impressions, but maybe some tangible results in terms of installs or downloads or any of those.
Yeah,
Click-through rate.
I think you're right on that count. That performance marketing is very important, and I also believe that but what I was talking about was the way some of the work is showcased on platforms like Insta.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for example, where they blame the algorithm that they have created if you've not reached certain numbers, which is not fair, no? Because finally you are still pocketing my money. So I'm saying that I think this year, especially 2023, by the time we are in Jan 2024, there's going to be a big churn in the way brands are going to be spending their money. Right now, they're a little helpless because what happens is brands come to you and say that, "Arey, yaar, my target audience is on Insta, and I want to do something on Insta." They're not very clear on what they want to do, but they want to be seen in this in a space where other brands are seen. And today, it's that kind of a fish market mentality. But I think more and more people um, are getting more proficient at how to use these platforms, and this includes both the clients as well as the agencies. I'm from a slightly older side of the agency business. There are many youngsters in the agencies that I work with who come and tell me that we need to do this, we should do this story, we should do that. I think what's happening is that everybody is so keen to be seen that they're not very focused on what they're seen with. And that I think will change, I think, in this year itself.
But from a platform standpoint, what do you think would be the new propositions of the platform, let's say in 18 to 24 months from now? What do you think they'd be doing differently in terms of algorithm, in terms of recommending advertisements or content in general?
I'm not very, very sure about that. It's too early to say anything about that. I'm talking more from the brand point of view rather than how the platforms will react to it, because I know that amongst the brand that I work with, a lot of people are a little confused as to whether they are actually getting more bang for their buck from these platforms or not. Everybody is united in one everything. Everybody is united in one viewpoint, which is that they are getting the maximum value for their money by advertising on the platforms that they're selling on.
And value could be subjective.
Yeah. So I'm saying if you're selling on Amazon, and if you're promoting your brand on Amazon itself by various means, then you know that your sales are actually your sales are actually increasing by that. And if you look at I think the reports already, Amazon and Flipkart are earning a decent chunk through advertising itself.
Right.
So when I say advertising, what happens is, let's assume that there are 6 different LED lights that are being sold. You can get into a marketing deal with Amazon to make sure that the LED light, that your LED brand appears before others.
Right.
There are all those kind of things, and that is where I feel the advertising rupee is going to be headed. When you can see tangible results on the internet, where they cannot blame the algorithm which has been created by them on results not being delivered. Another way of getting good value for money are these influencers, which I was actually, when I first heard of influencers, I said, what the hell are they? Why are we having influencers? But it's worked for many of the brands that I've been associated with. As long as you get the right influencer to utilize, to sort of associate with your brand.
And how would you define the right influencer? Maybe what are some pointers that you take a check on?
I think that his target audience and the brand's target audience should have a very big overlap. His tone of voice, his or hers tone of voice should not be very contrary to the brand's tone of voice. For example, if the influencer is a very in-your-face influencer, he should not be promoting a product which is more subtle in its communication. The influencer should be open to there are two kinds of influencers. Certain influencers who are so big and who are so famous, they say that we've got our own tone of voice, and we will plug your brand, but we will do it in our in the way that we are, in our style. And there are other influencers who don't mind working with the agencies involved and say, all right, I'll change my thing a bit. I will only create the communication, but I will sort of get it okayed by you guys or greenlit by you guys, saying, okay, this is in keeping with the brand's ethos, because finally they are getting paid by the brand, and so they should do so. And I think those are the kind of influencers that most brands are more comfortable with.
So in a way, you're suggesting that brands should work together with the influencer on creating the thought process or the idea of the content itself.
Yeah, because as a brand, I will not associate with the influencer only because he's got the numbers. I mean, some brands might do that, but serious brands will associate with influencers who also fit the profile of their users.
Right.
It's not just the number of people who are following the influencer. Is it? It's also we also have to think about whether those people are brand users or not. If an influencer is popular with 20-year-olds, but your brand is popular with 40-year-olds, then it doesn't make sense.
Right. So interesting. And one thing you mentioned is you don't use Twitter and you're not very active on Instagram or LinkedIn or other platforms either.
On Instagram, I just showcase some of the work that I do. I don't use it much otherwise. And my Insta handle is Amul Manish, and that I just populate it with the stuff that I do. Other than that, I don't really use Insta much. Twitter, because I find that there's too much hatred on Twitter, so it's best to get your news from other sources. And I think that's about it. What can I say?
But why do you think you don't use, let's say, Instagram or LinkedIn very actively? Compared to, let's say, Dick Kunha, you mentioned, who runs the ad agency that writes the creatives for, takes control of the creatives for Amul, who's very active on Twitter. Of course, I got your point about Twitter, that there's a lot of hatred. But what do you have to say about, let's say, Instagram or LinkedIn or other social networks?
No, I don't know. I personally prefer utilizing my time in things that give me more joy. I like reading. I like doing cryptic crosswords. I like doing all of those things. So why waste my time on all these platforms? I'm getting a lot of satisfaction from my work. What is Instagram going to give to me? Let's be selfish about it. Right. What will Insta give to me except for maybe more recognition? I've got enough recognition in my field. Yes, of course, you can always be greedy for more. But, if you're going to only look for that, then you're not going to, do so many other things that you can with your life. I love traveling. I love reading. So if I've got time, I do all of those things.
So, since you mentioned you love reading and solving cryptic crosswords, looks like all your hobbies and passion is, confined to words.
But really, I love traveling. Traveling has got nothing to do with words.
Sure.
I love traveling. I love, trying all different kinds of food. I was born a Jain, but then I became a chickenism one, let's put it that way, when I was 16. And I'm an avid non-vegetarian. So yes, I travel a lot. I, try out various different restaurants. I visit, I like music a great deal. So I visit, whenever I can. I visit, I attend concerts, which is, these are not really word-oriented things. Yes, cryptic crosswords, yes. And cryptic crosswords also I got into fairly late, just 6 or 7 years ago, when a friend sort of insisted that I get into them. And, there's a group on Facebook called Cryptic Crossword Society. So he sort of made me a member of that. And it took me a few months to learn the nuances of cryptic crosswords. But now I'm like pretty hooked. And I set many clues myself and put it on that group. So it's interesting. What it also does is it actually hones your skills as a writer, because you've got to say so much in such a short, in such a concise manner.
Your vocabulary is refined.
Your vocabulary gets refined, and the way you say things also gets enhanced. And there are many, most of the members, I think 80% of the members of Cryptic Crosswords are from either Chennai or Bangalore. So, it's like...
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And since you mentioned, you might not have much to gain from, let's say, Instagram, except for recognition, which you've already received to a great extent. but a lot of newcomers, aspiring copywriters, people who are looking to make a career in copywriting in 2023, as we speak now, a lot of these people are, maybe I'm wrong, but I would say obsessed about getting a social media following, because that might be a good way for you to demonstrate your portfolio or show that what you write is liked by many people and can potentially be liked by many more if you weren't a prey to algorithms.
So I think that, if you are a copywriter and you're already working for an agency, then the chances are that your work is already being showcased on Instagram for the brands that you're working on. Like the places that I work with, a lot of the work, though I'm not on Twitter, I've written tweets for various brands. Though I'm not that active on Insta, I've written various creatives for them which run on Insta as well as Facebook. So if you are a copywriter, you just need to showcase your work. It doesn't matter. You don't need to showcase. If your work is good enough, if your work is going to speak for you, then you don't need all of these things. You can just make sure that everybody knows that you've done these pieces of work. I mean, they can all be part of your portfolio, and you can get your you can let people know how bright you are.
Got it. And how do you? Okay, let me rephrase this. How did you get into copywriting, number one, and more specifically into Amul, which from what I understand, is much, later in your career. You didn't start off with Amul per se.
No, so that's what. No, like I told you that the Amul hoardings always appealed to me. There was one Amul hoarding very close to my school. There was another one which was close to my friend's house. So I used to get to see both of the hoardings, and I used to enjoy them a great deal. I did science I joined science in 11th and 12th, and after that I took up architecture. I finished my course in architecture. 5 years I did architecture, and I started doing a lot of exhibition design. And even then I used to see all these Amul hoardings, and I used to really like them. And in college I was always a little bit of a punner. I was always a fan of Mad magazines and of Mad magazine and Marx Brothers and a lot of the funnies. And then while I was doing an exhibition, while I was designing an exhibition, I came across certain advertising agencies who were working with the brand whose stalls I had designed. So those people knew the guy. They knew the people at Amul, and they knew the people at Dakunas, and that's how I got to meet them. And I told them that I'm a big fan. And at that point of time, they had a little bit of vacuum because various people had left. And I told them that I have no experience at all, and I'm doing this exhibition design. So they said that doesn't matter. You come and spend time here, and then you see what happens. And then I spent time, and they really liked what I wrote for them, and I was very lucky that they gave me that opportunity. And it was something that I always wanted to do. Even today, when I meet friends from college, they say that, my God, you used to tell us that, Arey, yaar, one day you'll do the Amul hoardings, and you're actually doing them.
Right.
So in that sense, it was. And when I was in college, I actually sauntered into into Dakunas, and I told them that this hoarding that you've done, I think I can do a better job. So then I was given a lecture, and I was told that, look, you're just some guy who everybody thinks that they can do a better job. You can't just come into the agency and tell us that you can do a better job than the guy who's been writing these hoardings for so many years. But thank you very much for your enthusiasm. See you or never.
Okay.
And then finally, when it actually happened, it was quite wonderful because Mr. Dakuna's, the senior Dakuna's secretary, she was still working there, and I told her that I'd come there. I was this cocky fellow. I must have been 18, 19 years old.
Right.
And he said, yeah, I remember. Yeah, but she didn't know my name and all that. But it was good. It was nice to just be able to do what I wanted to.
Very interesting. That's quite an interesting journey, right? So you think the second conversation with the secretary at Dakunas was your gateway into Amul?
Yeah. Then I started going there more regularly, and then of course everybody was used to be very scared of her, but because we had this connection, she was very friendly with me. So it was like.
So right, does this sort of fall into the umbrella of if you create a controversy, you're remembered better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So, speaking of creating controversy, do you think it's a good idea to take that as a route to get your brand out there or get your promotion out there? Let's say you're creating a movie or just about anything.
I think if controversies are created smartly, then yes. But it's very difficult in in yeah we live in a very touchy age, So if a controversy backfires, then especially for a movie, then you have all these random and rowdy elements saying that we will ban your movie and resorting to all of that crap. So then it becomes a very expensive exercise. So you have to be very careful, how you create a controversy. It's like a Frankenstein. It's out of your control.
So the critical factor is how you make the comeback. If your comeback fails, you're gone.
Yeah, it's very tricky, especially like I said, you know, in this day and age, it's like little too. Got to be careful. You have to tread carefully.
Sure. The reason I ask is I was watching another podcast and I remember these guys talking about. You remember the Cybertruck launch by Elon Musk, the original time when they were doing this promotional campaign and they, threw a weapon at it and the car shattered and then they told, okay, we'll fix this and come back. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories around that suggesting that it must have been done intentionally just to grab the attention that Elon Musk or the team Tesla failed miserably and then they wanted to make a comeback and get that heroism tag or whatever that is.
Yeah, that's what it's very difficult. These days, it's very difficult to say what has been staged and what hasn't. You have what that thing called deep what, wherein
Do the chess game.
No. There's a technical term for it, wherein your likeness or my likeness can be made in such a manner that even though we are not there, people will actually seem like we are part of the we are part of a video. It's called what, deep something.
Okay.
I forget the term. So that's the kind of deep. They embedded it so deeply that you don't really know. That's how, especially in USA, that's how when elections start, the kind of maligning of politicians that happens there, they will take some small little issue and they will make the politician, through this deep whatever I was saying, part of something which he or she may not have been. That's why there's so much mudslinging that goes on. We haven't yet reached that level. Hopefully, we should go past that level. We shouldn't stop there. But
right. That leads me to. I'm tempted to ask. Right, you mentioned going to Amul and you received the recognition with Amul campaigns, like Amul copies that you wrote, the puns and the different texts that you might have written for them. At some point, seeing your success, I'm assuming many other brands would have been chasing you to, maybe even offering you much higher sums of money to be working for them. And I know that you're working now as a consultant, but were you always the consultant, or were you ever tempted to take up another opportunity, let's say, that must be contradicting with Amul from a financial because of a financial standpoint?
So, like I told you that since the last 20 years, I've been a consultant, and I went to Rahul and I told him that, look, I'm getting offers from a lot of other companies, not in the witty area, but from a lot of other companies to work with them as to do copy work for them. So I will not be able to continue my full-time duties with him. And he was very open. He said, yeah, I understand that completely. And please continue doing the Amul hoardings for us. And, I'm not going to stop you. You can do whatever you want. And that's the way it was. So see, what happens is things become murky when you keep secrets. If you're open about it, at least at least he also knows that, either way, I'm going to be doing work for other people. So at least I'm being very
transparent about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm being very transparent about it. And that's how we've always been. So, for example, if I've given a couple of ideas, I usually give two options. Suppose we are thinking of a line. So I'll probably give two options. One might be a very English option. One might be a English option, whatever it could be. But there are times that Rahul will say, "Arey yaar, this is not the usual Manish flair. Can you try something else?"
Right.
It happens rarely, but it does happen. And you have to say, okay, no problem. So I think that openness has served us really well. He's also open. If he's uncomfortable about something, he's open about it. And the way I was when I started working with other companies, I told him before I started working with other companies, and he was fine with it.
Interesting. And at some point, when you were working with multiple brands and maybe many other prospects, like maybe award shows, or reality shows. I'm not sure what else. But when you're working for different segments, how do you make sure that the tone that you convey through your copy or through your text or content is different for each brand and caters to them independently?
I think that the brand, that your like for example, I do a lot of work for the Taj Group of Hotels through one of
Mhm.
the agencies I work with by design. So now the Taj Group of Hotels, and within the Taj Group of Hotels also you've got the main brand, the mother brand, which is Taj. Then you've got Vivanta Hotels,
Right.
and now the Vivanta Hotels has a slightly more has a young vibe, whereas the mother brand has a more uh, has a more uh, slightly elitist vibe. I won't call it elitist, but for the want of a better word, the language is a little more old fashioned and
Mhm.
more correct. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
So each brand has its tone of voice, and you need to, as a writer, you can't be unidimensional. So you
Mhm.
need to adapt to the way the brand is communicating. If you have been the person who started with when the brand was in its infancy, then you yourself would have probably had a role in deciding the tone of voice of the brand. If you weren't there then and you're joining it at a later date, you know that the brand has already got a tone of voice in place which they're happy with. If
Mhm.
they're not happy with it, they will also tell you that, can we change the tone of voice? Then you can help them do so. But if they're happy with the tone of voice, then you have to ensure that it's like an actor. An actor does so many different roles.
Right.
If he's doing if he's playing a killer, then he's got those mannerisms. If he's playing a father figure, then he's got those mannerisms. So I think that writers are also actors with words.
Wow. Yeah, maybe that one line sums up why you're so good at what you do. Writers are actors with words. That's so beautifully worded. So maybe the kind of content you write for, let's say, something that's being advertised in flight, must be much different from something being advertised in a regular consumer magazine that's being sold in chai stalls.
So again, yes, but I would, but they're both in that sense. They're both magazine ads. Where your skill as a writer really comes in is when you're talking about the different media.
Mhm.
So Insta might have its own way of talking. I mean, the brand on Insta might
So the
have a
lingo
certain,
matters.
yeah. So that is very important. I feel, and even maybe in certain regions. So
Mhm.
of course, like I mean, I would probably work only in English and Hindi, but
Right.
for example, the communication for certain brands should be such that you should not lose anything in translation.
Hmm.
So, like Amul Hoarding, so we use the same line wherever we are going. But I'm saying that if you're working on, say, an LED brand, your English line should not be a punny line which cannot translate well into, say, Gujarati or Bengali or some other language. It needs to have a deeper thought in place so that whichever language it gets translated into, the essence isn't lost.
Got it. And maybe there's a sensitive question to ask, but do you at all points look for you deeply resonating with what the brand is selling before you agree to write copy for them? Do you really care about, let's say, the mission of the company or what it's kind of selling, and maybe something, let's say, against your thesis or against your ethical principles, so to speak? How do you approach those scenarios?
So I generally make some excuse and I don't do the work. I mean,
Ah,
I'm really busy. I can't take, the, if I'm not very comfortable with working for a particular brand, then I don't work. I'm not,
interesting.
yeah. It's like, see,
But
sometimes,
I mean, does it sort of drive an impression that this XYZ is very cocky and they're very selective about what they do? Like, and maybe does that impact the amount of work that you get eventually?
well, I don't know. I'm quite busy, so it may not have impacted that aspect so much. But the thing is, what I mean, if you're not comfortable working for a particular company or a brand, then it is best not to start working. You give them you tell them that you're really busy, and that's why you
Yeah.
can't really do justice to them. Because what will happen is that you might do a good job for them for the first 2 3 months, but then slowly it'll start
The
gnawing
quality
at
would
you that
start dropping
yeah, that
down.
what am I doing here? I'm hawking something which I don't really believe in. Maybe it'll do well with whatever you've done because you are professional. So you will do a good job advertising their wares, and they might do well even though you don't really respect them. Somewhere or the other, it'll probably show, I think. So yes, I
Interesting.
mean, it's okay.
Okay, and maybe when you're speaking about, let's say, going back to the influencer marketing point, let's say a brand chooses to work with multiple influencers or multiple copywriters, maybe at tenures of stints of 6 months or 12 months or whatever. Do you think frequently changing the tone of the content being delivered would affect the brand value, so to speak? Do you think one thing Amul has done right is maybe retaining an individual? In your case, maybe 3 individuals, the cartoonist and Dakun has and you as well. Do you think sort of sticking to one content writer really makes a difference in retaining your brand picture in the longer run?
I haven't actually thought about that, but maybe it does help because the thinking process has been the yeah, maybe it does the open-mindedness and uh, the way of looking at things is from that same point of view. So I think in that sense it does help. My in the sense that our set of values have been the same. We don't want to hurt anybody. So all of those things I think do matter because finally you will put a little bit of yourself in whatever work you do.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting question. Nobody's asked me that before, but I think yes, maybe to a certain extent.
So in this day and age when brands are dealing with influencers on a continuously changing basis, you think it's sort of a bottleneck for them? Do you think they should take this step and maybe stick to one?
So what I'm saying is that I feel that the example that you gave, that I've been with Amul for so many years. You look at certain brands, they have maintained or they have retained the same brand ambassador for many years.
Right.
And that brand ambassador becomes almost an extension of the brand because he or she is identified with that brand. Like like Irfan Khan and Siska for that matter.
Right.
Until he passed, he was always doing their work. So he became almost a part of the Siska family. So I feel that kind of thing also works. So it's not that all brands are in a hurry to use different people. They might have a mix of both. They might have a brand ambassador who will have a long-term commitment to them, maybe 3-4 years, because finally greed gets the better of most people. The brand ambassador will say that I'm getting double the money from Coke or whatever. So then greed becomes a defining factor there. But he'll have one abiding brand ambassador, but at the same time he'll have other influencers who are smaller, where it doesn't matter who the influencer is because his target audience is an overlap with the brand's target audience. And as long as the message resonates with the brand, I don't think the brand will have a problem either.
Yeah, but besides the fact that there's an overlap of audience in terms of who's watching it and what demography do they belong to and what age group, what interests they might have and stuff like that, how important do you think is this factor of influence itself, right? That a certain influence might have more trust factor associated with their audience as opposed to many others.
Yeah, so that is why it is very important, like I told you earlier on only, to choose the right influencer. Take time to choose the right influencer. Don't go with the flavor of the season.
Right.
See whether that influencer works with your brand, and then make sure that you guys work closely with one another.
So the approach is always from a long-term perspective.
I always look at it that way because otherwise things are as it is very disposable. So at least if you want your message to have a certain amount of impact over a period of time, then I think a little bit of continuity helps.
Interesting. But you also mentioned that before you someone used to try the Amul copy and you were very impressed by the hoardings that were put up back then. That's what interested you. And you also mentioned how the cartoonist does a fantastic job in conveying the message that needs to be. And what do you think is going to be the role of, let's say, generative AI or ChatGPT and these platforms, right? Do you think they could turn out to be better artists and better writers? And if so, would you still say, I can do a better job than that? The same thing that
I
you told
don't
to
really know. know. I don't really know, and hopefully AI will enter after I've retired, not before. So, or let's hope that AI is not the reason I retire.
Uh-huh.
But I don't really know, because with I was watching this Mozart in the Jungle, this OTT show. So Mozart's last piece was unfinished. He died before he could finish that last piece. So
Mm-hmm.
they get a robot to create what would have been his last piece, and the
Mm-hmm.
conductor says that this is not what Mozart would have done because this is too mechanical. There is no blood in it. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel that writing like music is also a very creative expression. And while a robot might be able to do uh, a technically good job, those flashes of brilliance may not happen. Because every once in a while there's a topical that we look at and say, oh wow, this one was everything fell into place just perfectly. Like
Mm-hmm.
we have a bar which we will never go below, but
Right.
certain sometimes a certain topical just transcends everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we just look at that some of those in the past and say, wow, this was like really really good. Like one of my like I'm a great cricket fan. So in the World Cup that was in one of our early World Cups that was happening in India, only Sachin Tendulkar was playing
Mm-hmm.
and everybody else was flopping. So
Okay.
we had a line that said 10 do, 10 don't.
Wow.
And the baseline was Amul, try some application. So I look back at that and say that was like a really a line that summed up
Yeah, it
everything.
messes with your
There are those
graces.
kind of things, yeah, that when you look back at even now, you sort of give yourself a pat on the back and say, wow, that was very good. So those kind of things, I feel maybe a robot may not be able to or AI may not be able to manage, but
But like you
there will be a
mentioned,
consistency.
this spell of brilliance is not very consistent, right? It just happens occasionally. So do you think that is always the, trick to the potion, or is there more to it? Because if it's not always about the brilliance, if it's just about consistency and meeting a certain threshold, then maybe AI can do a good job.
That's what I'm saying. That what we do. There are two aspects to it. One is that never go below this bar. Never go below a bar you set, but try as often as you can to go much above it. So
Mhm.
whether AI will be convinced enough, so the AI has managed to get to that bar. Will it be driven enough to constantly go beyond it or not? That is where I feel that humans might do a better job than AI. But one never knows. AI
And
is
this reminds me
rapidly.
of a tweet by Mark Anderson, right? The guy who runs A16Z Venture Capital Fund. He recently tweeted telling, if an AI bot is writing better than you, what kind of writing are you even doing?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I want to see. It's very difficult to know what has been written by a bot and what has been written by. Actually, the byline is there. So I want to see some resource where there is a lot of work by bots, so that you know that okay, this is the level that they've already reached.
hmm.
And I don't know whether bots have a sense of humor or not. That I think is
Yeah, it would be hard to get maybe bots to write puns. They might not be able to
and
get
multilingual puns.
references.
So, but I don't know, that may be the next challenge that we have faced. That how do you make sure that Amul doesn't go from utterly butterly delicious to utterly bottily delicious?
Wow, too good. Yeah. So, so you think your role is safe at Amul, and AI
I
can't do
don't know.
anything as yet?
I don't know. I don't wanna. I don't think about it. I don't think about things which really which you can't predict. If it
Right.
happens, it happens. You can't do anything about it. But Amul has been very good to us for very long.
Mhm.
So let's see what happens.
And besides the fact that you enjoy the work at Amul, what do you think is the maybe the prime reason for being so loyal to Amul?
They've not given me any reason to
Be
not
loyal,
work
yeah.
for them. You know,
Right.
why do you work? They may not be the best pay. They may not be the. I make more money elsewhere. So they may not be giving me the maximum money, but they've given me the maximum recognition.
Right.
Thanks to the work that I have done in Amul, I have managed to get work from a lot
That's
of other
right.
people.
Right.
And that I think is, so it's in that sense, it's a calling card. And they are very, loyal to. Like, loyalty works both ways. No? So
Right.
they are, I'm sure that many writers must be approaching them and saying that, "Arey, why don't you give us a chance? Why, they must be getting pressures from everywhere. Some minister's son will say, "Arey, mera agency hai, aap mere ko chance do." But they've never done that. So they've been very faithful to us, and I think it's only fair that we return that loyalty.
Return that loyalty. And do you think one major factor that leads to this loyalty on both ends is maybe transparency?
I think so.
Okay.
They have, I'm telling you, they're such an amazing client, as in, and I since I work for different brands, I'm giving you a sort of overview that there are brands where the brand managers are so interfering and so overbearing. They, they tie your hands behind you and then expect you to rewrite the copy, which is
Right.
very difficult to do, because you're not giving us any space, you're not giving us any breathing room. But Amul doesn't even see most of the topicals that go out. They see it only when the rest of the consumers see it. It's that kind of freedom that they give us. It's only when we are doing something which has got slightly political overtones that we share it with the client, just because we have everybody is sort of on tenterhooks these days.
Right.
And there have been a couple of times when Amul has said that maybe we can not do this. Let's try some other topic, and we said okay, sure. But otherwise, if you're doing a movie poster, or we are doing a takeoff on a movie, or a takeoff on something else, they get to see it with the rest of the world. Which client will give you that kind of freedom?
Right. Maybe creative freedom is also one important factor that allows you to bring that excellence factor.
I think so. I think especially for a creative person, without creative freedom, he or she will really feel stifled. So I think that is, a big a boon with Amul.
Right. And just a random question, have you ever considered, launching courses on how to do copywriting or how to bring humor in your content and stuff like that? Because there's a lot of these content-based startups that are coming up today, right?
I've never thought of something like that, because, like I told you, that maybe if I am not maybe if I've got more time on my hand, then I'll think of all of these things. But until I'm busy, then maybe I won't really have too much time to think about these things. I'm sure that there are many good ideas out there waiting to be tackled, and maybe one day I might be doing something like that. But right now, I haven't thought about it.
Right.
I'm sure that there are colleges who, especially in this day of topicality, colleges and other courses who want communication to be funny. So what are the tricks? What are the things that I have used over the years? Yeah, there are a few tricks that I've used, and I'm sure that it can help some other people too. But I have not really given it any thought.
I see. And you also mentioned you travel a lot, and how do you think has travel influenced your creative style?
I think it travel helps you keep a very open mind. You also get various triggers. Going there, you're somewhere, you go to a beautiful cafe. You might be having a croissant that doesn't have any Amul butter in it, but it triggers an idea which you can. So even when I'm traveling, for that matter, Rahul is one WhatsApp away. He'll just tell me that, "Arey, Manish, can you send me this from wherever you are?" So it's that kind of a thing. So while I might be heading to a museum, or I might be somewhere else, I'll say, "Yeah, okay, I'm not in India right now, but give me a bit, give me some time, I'll get back to you." So travel, I think, is great for just about everybody. And if you're in the creative arts, or any creative line, then travel opens your mind in ways you can't even understand. Like my daughter, she's 18 now, but I think travel has helped her become a much more complete person, because she's visited so many museums, she's visited so many different places, and in my first 18 years, I didn't really have that kind of opportunity.
Those experiences,
and I can see it. That okay, wow, there is so much more knowledge which you don't even realize. So this is like, this is knowledge which is just sort of percolating into their being without having to read a book or anything of that sort. And that knowledge is like becomes almost a muscle memory. You've seen how things are in other parts of the world, in other regions. So when people give excuses for why they aren't that way in our country, then you know that it doesn't really hold water.
Hmm. And so if you're traveling, how do you still maintain consistency, right? Because a lot of creators today would be mentioning creative block as one of their prime bottlenecks. Beyond a
I think the
certain
best
point.
solution for creative blocks is travel,
Okay.
because you take your mind away from the work. I mean, if there is a creative block, if you're walking on a road and you see a wall in front of you, you will retrace your steps, or you will go back and you will try to find another way, a way to get past that thing, right? So travel lets you do that. If you're facing a creative block, I feel that unless of course it's a very deadline oriented thing and you don't really have that luxury, but otherwise if you've got say even a day to submit something, or 2 days to submit something, wait until the very last minute, do something else entirely. It could be anything. It could be listening to your favorite piece of music. It could be going to some nice little exotic restaurant with your family or friends or whoever it is. Do something which doesn't involve that piece of work at all, and then come back to it. You know, a very, very celebrated copywriter, Neil French, who was the creative director of Ogilvy, he I read his articles, and he said that when I have a deadline to work on, I make sure that I give it only at the last minute. I will go and play pool. I will go and have some whiskey. I will go and do this, and until things don't become desperate, my best ideas don't spring. So it's that, okay, now you know that it's a do or die moment. You have to give it within the next whatever time. Then it happens. But I'm saying that we were talking about creative blocks. Whenever I've had a creative block, I stop working on it for maybe 2 hours, maybe 8 hours, whatever it is, how much ever time, and then I come back to it.
But let's
And
say when you're procrastinating or delaying, the submission, and you say
I
the
don't do
ideas
that.
come up
I'm
under
just saying,
pressure.
no. I'm saying that now what happens is that, like, that was Neil French's way. I do. I
Sure.
mean, if I've got something, if I think of something, I just quickly, dictate it into the phone so that I
Mhm.
don't forget about
Forget
it.
it.
That's what many of the great lyricists also do.
Right.
Like Elvis Costello, he used to have a book next to his bed. He used to
Mhm.
think of something at 2 o'clock in the morning. He used to just quickly write it down. Bob
Mhm.
Dylan, he used to have some uh, old tape recorder. He used to just think of whatever he wrote, and he used to just, irrespective of whether it's a music or whether it's a piece of music or some words, he used to just dictate it onto it. It was like a dictaphone for him, and I think that helps.
Got it. But while you mentioned that you have abundant creative freedom at Amul, at some point, do you think having to do this one creative every other day, or topicals every other day, do you think it becomes a constraint in terms of deadlines, and does it in some way cater block your, not necessarily your creative freedom, but the time that you want to take for it?
So it's not, we don't do it every other day. It's between 10 and 15. So we do between 10 and 17. So sometimes we do 3 hoardings in a day.
Uh-huh.
Like when there are football ones and all, there are like lots happening at the same time. But sometimes there are only 10 topicals in the entire month. So you've got like, you have to do one in 3 days. When I joined Amul, we used to do one in every 5 days. So,
Hmm.
now there's more of a traffic jam of hoardings than
Uh-huh.
there used to be. But see, we are very aware that there are certain topics that work better than others, and that is understandable. Uh, and But like I said, that there is this, there is a threshold that we will never go below, and there are times when we don't do a hoarding for a week. If there is nothing happening, we don't do a hoarding for a week. But then the next week, suddenly you might do 5 hoardings because there's something happening every second day. So the topics themselves, speak to you in the sense that, if for example, like Pele's demise, we had to do something there. When Argentina made it to the finals, you
Finals.
know, we had to do something there. When Argentina won, we had to do something there. Those kind of
Right.
things are like, you know, there were many outings in that one week. So
Hmm.
those kind of things, just, they're very easy topics to do. You don't really have to think too much. You know that, okay, this topic, maybe it's also because I've been doing it for such a long time, so maybe it's a little easier for me. But
Mhm.
certain topics are, mandatory almost. You have to do that. I don't think I faced much of a I faced uh, much of a problem in that aspect. I've not had too many, you know, creative blocks as such. I've
Got it.
found ways to dodge the creative blocks. Let's put it that way.
Got it. And one of those ways is travel, like you mentioned.
Travel. If you can't travel, then at least travel through your favorite songs. Travel
Hmm.
through a movie. Travel in any way you can. Just
Basically, distract your mind from that particular
move away
prospect.
from. Yeah, travel is basically moving away from your creative block. That in itself is travel.
Wow. Okay. So that's a pun right there. Sure. So, just a couple of random questions, Manish. Is if you had endless freedom and money to travel just about anywhere, what would you travel and what unique thing would you do when it comes to travel?
So, two of my favorite cities, which I haven't been able to visit in some time now because of the pandemic and because of these, European visas becoming.
Yeah, it's quite a
Yeah,
challenge.
yeah. So two of my favorite cities are Paris and London, and
Hmm.
I visit both of them very often. And a third favorite city, which I've been able to travel to pretty easily, is Bangkok because I love the food there, and I just like a lot of things about the place. But if I had all the money in the world, where would I like to travel to? I would like to go to the Galapagos Islands. I
Hmm.
haven't been there, and I just want to go there away from you know
Humans,
mankind as such, and yeah, just
interesting.
see a 200-year-old giant tortoise.
Tortoise. Yeah.
Yeah, just see what he see. She has seen so many years in this world and is still at peace. So just get away from this. It's so far away from the mainland and so difficult to get to that you have to do a lot of groundwork even before you reach that place. So yeah,
Hmm.
that is on my wish list. That and the Easter Island also. Those are things that maybe I will go to when I've got maybe a little more time. And
And
yeah, those are things.
have you ever contemplated writing a book of one-liners that you might have written but never went on, on a hoarding or any of those?
I've often thought of that. I've
Uh huh.
often thought of the things that were that sometimes what happens is that Rahul and I don't see eye to eye.
Hmm.
I tell him that I think this line should go. He said no, I like the other line more.
Hmm.
So sometimes he allows my line to go through. Sometimes I have to allow his line to go through.
Hmm.
And yeah, there are all of those things, and sometimes we very topics for various reasons. While we might have done the topic, but then we say that no, let's not get into it. It might become a little too controversial or whatever it is. So yes, that's something I've also thought of, that it would be a very interesting. Uh, it would be a very interesting, I would say, diary rather than a book.
Yeah,
But
I'm
yeah, it
sure
would be
many
very
people
interesting.
like me would love to read that.
Yeah,
There's a bunch of us who were born in '90s who have followed this whenever it came up, right?
yeah. No, yes, I mean, it's not just the Amul hoardings that should have gone there, but so many things that you wanted to say but didn't finally say.
Right.
That in itself is, I'm sure that somebody must have already written a book like that. But yeah, it's a very interesting topic.
Sure. Thanks a lot for doing this, Manish. I think it's been quite interesting. Before we go, any advice for aspiring copywriters, aspiring script writers, any of those?
Yeah, I feel that that in our and I have done award shows. I have done scripts. I've done all kinds of writing, and I feel that especially in movies, if you want to be a script writer, make sure you've got a friend in the legal department who goes through all the documents that they give you,
Hmm.
because the script is king is only just a random thought that all these actors say.
Hmm.
Finally, the script writers don't get much, uh, and unfortunately, unfortunately, we are in an industry where the script writers are at the they don't really have much influence.
Hmm.
Irrespective of what producers say that it's a script that decides it all, 99% of the budget will be for the actors, and there'll be hardly a handout given to the script writers. Unlike in, say, more evolved markets like USA and places like that, where the budget for the scripting of a decent sized movie is half that of direction. So the script
Mhm.
writers, if a script writer writes one movie, he can live off it very comfortably for 2 to 3 years. But be that as it may, I feel that writing is a very rewarding career in two ways. If you get the right job, you will of course do pretty well.
Mhm.
Secondly, it gives you a great deal of satisfaction.
Right.
You have been able to see something that you have created. You've been able to it's like you've created work which is being appreciated by so many different people. And in this age of likes and needing to be liked, I feel that writing in that sense is a very rewarding career, uh, emotionally as well as on a personal level. And the other advice I would like to give writers who are just starting out is that uh, don't get disillusioned too quickly, because everybody thinks he can write. The
Mhm.
brand manager who's actually got an MBA will think that he can tell you how to write things. He will give his advice. He'll say that why don't you change it? Why don't you use this word instead of that word? Because everybody's learned English till whatever 12th standard. They've done their education in that language, so everybody thinks they can write. But you must convince him that what you have written is better, and if you can do that, then he will respect you more also. So in
Mhm.
the initial days, you will be kicked around like a football, but
Mhm.
don't worry. If you stay the course, you will like really shine. What happens is I've seen many youngsters, they give up too quickly. Don't do that.
Got it.
Don't do that, because then you will not gain the. See, many of the older people say that, oh, we've struggled so much. These guys are coming in right now and want so many things. So there is a little bit of a chip on their shoulders already. Don't feed that. Make sure that you do a really good job and don't give up too easily. Assume that, so, even if you're not happy at the place, last for the first 1 year at least, which
Mhm.
I know is a long time for many of these youngsters.
Mhm.
But give yourself that when you're joining a company, don't give yourself the target of only that the next company I'm going to join, I'm going to join at 25% more money. Give
Mhm.
yourself a target that I want to be here for at least 1 year, because it's not just the money that you learn, it is all the skills that you will hone,
Cool.
because you will be part of a bigger team, you will be part of a team that has that knows the work that they're doing. So all of that you will glean, and it will only help you in your journey.
Got it. So, Manish, one last question. If you were 20 today and you had all the experiences you've gained after working with a ton of clients, after traveling the world and all of these, what would you do today as a 20-year-old?
i would probably uh, I would probably do something in the realm of travel. Maybe a travel app, maybe something like that, which requires me to convince people that there is an entire world out there to see,
Mhm.
and maybe something of that sort, which would basically combine my two loves. There are many loves, but which would combine my love of words with my love of the world.
So
I
maybe you
would do
would write
something like that.
travelogues.
Sorry.
So maybe you would write travelogues.
Maybe travelogue, maybe something different. Maybe I would actually record videos of some of these travels, and you know how to everybody, the first trip to Europe is always a very expensive affair. So
Right.
how do you make travel a little more accessible to everybody? I
Mhm.
don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking out aloud, but
Right.
it would marry those two things probably. That and who knows? Maybe once I retire, I'll probably do something like that. But I don't know. But yeah, as a 20-year-old or as a 60-year-old, I don't know. Maybe the two things are converging. But
Interesting.
maybe
Thanks.
something
Thanks
like
a
that.
lot for doing this, Manish. This has been a very different from most other podcasts that I've done. I would say deeply personal, maybe touching upon a lot of things that's maybe very close to people like me, which is the Amul topicals. And yeah, thanks a lot for doing this. Really enjoyed
No, no,
this.
welcome, and I hope that all your listeners get an insight into the advertising industry. It
Yeah.
is changing very rapidly, but there is still a lot to like about it. And all the best to anybody who embarks upon this journey.
And since
Yeah.
you mentioned that, is there anything you would do different if you were an executive today? Executive in terms of running a company or an advertising agency or any of these, let's say, social media platforms, what would you do different to cater to advertising?
That's a little, it's not a one-man answer, because it's more of a, you would have to get into a conversation with many different people, each of whom has his or her own area of expertise, and figure out how to do things in a concerted manner. I think what is very evident is that the control is rapidly uh, going to the playground rather than the players. I'm talking
Right.
about in advertising. And
Right.
how do you get some of that control back? Because once it becomes completely driven by the playground, then creativity will
So
definitely
can't
lose
get,
out.
yeah.
So yeah, so content and creativity will definitely lose out. So that is a longer debate to have, and it's not something which can come with a band-aid answer. So
Right.
yeah, but still, it's an interesting question. But anyway, best of luck again to all of the guys who
Thanks.
watched this, and